Going live. Ask the Podcast Coach for November 13th, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Coming to you live off my hotspot. I woke up to no internet, and then they promised they'd have it by like 8:30 a.m. Central. We blew through that. So it's like, well, we're using the hotspot this morning.
Yeah,
so let's hope for the best.
They're probably going, oh, did you mean today? Oh no, 8:30, 3 weeks
Monday.
from now. Yeah.
We meant Monday. So it's always good to be on Ask the Podcast Coach.
Yeah.
Good to be back. It was nice to take a week off.
Yeah, it was weird. I was in Florida last week attending a podcast conference. It was called Podfest Origins, and it was billed to be intimate. But we also shared a hockey arena. Yes, a hockey arena with a bunch of blockchain Bitcoin people.
Yeah.
And I got the world's best what do they call it? Backwards compliment?
Compliments, yeah.
Yeah.
Backhanded compliment, I think is what
yeah, backhanded. Because I went in there and I was so nervous because these guys are talking in nothing but acronyms. I mean, it was like, okay, but if it makes it to the chain and then the AKM has to go into the MBC and then the blah, blah, and I'm like, and I'm going to talk to these people. I barely understand. I still don't quite understand blockchain. But I went in and I explained how you can basically stream Bitcoin to your podcast and how to do it and what was available and blah, blah, blah. And so that night at a networking event, this guy came up, he goes, hands down, I got to tell you something. And I'm like, oh, okay, what? He's like, hands down, you were the best presenter of the whole conference. Nice. And I was like, oh, that's great to hear. Thank you so much. He goes, yeah, those other guys, man, a bunch of engineers and nerds, so boring. And I was like, okay, so
yeah, they don't really know what they're talking about. Yeah, just to be honest.
So the bar was set very, very low, apparently. So
no, it's good. That's good. Well, you do it a lot. You do this kind of presentation stuff a lot, so you should.
Yeah. So it was fun. But
you know what I do a lot of?
What do you do? Oh,
I drink a lot of coffee. Can you
we can hook you up with that?
Can you help me out?
I'm laughing. I'm like, wait, is the pink button the coffee? It's been a while. But of course, that coffee is brought to you by our friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need really anything to look professional, last night I was making we'll talk about the backdrop behind me, but you'll notice there is that lovely School of Podcasting logo in a virtual background. And when I uploaded that, I was like, man, I'm so glad I used Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need a logo, if you need artwork, if you need a full website, if you need kind of a branding audit, he can do all of that stuff. If you need a lead magnet, I could go on. I feel like that guy in Forrest Gump. Or just if you need lead magnets, logos, artwork, it's all there. Podcastbranding.co. And the best part is Mark's also a podcaster, so he gets podcasting. You don't have to explain all that other stuff. So if you need something to look good, go over to podcastbranding.co.
Cappuccino, hold the phone. Take me home.
And of course, Jim is sipping out of that fine-looking mug, courtesy of Dan.
Yeah, based on a true story podcast. Based on a true story podcast.com. Big thanks to Dan for supporting the show and doing all that. Since we took the last week off, I did a tweet for him last week to say, hey, because they pay for that, Dave. That's the hard part about sometimes when you have sponsors, got to fill that stuff in. So Dan, thanks for letting us take a week off, and thanks for sponsoring this mug's going to last forever.
It's working. You know why?
Why?
Sponsoring Jim's mug is worth it because he's definitely picked up at least one new listener, that being Glenn the Geek.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Went over to check out his episodes on Band of Brothers, and then Glenn sent him some feedback, and Dan was like, "Oh my gosh, you're Glenn the Geek!" So it was very cool.
It's some good stuff. It actually, Chris sent me some Island Coffee, EILAND from Richardson, Texas, and it was super delicious. So Chris, thanks for sending that. I've not been able to stop thinking about that coffee. Like every morning, I'm like, I bought when it ran out, I bought the store, but the store
Well,
stuff.
isn't it laced with Oxycontin? Isn't that how that works?
Listen, it's very possible because
Just kidding.
of course, I could just not, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so Sarah was like, why don't you just buy it? So I picked up 3 pounds. Shipping was free at that price point, $50. I think shipping's free. And it arrived. This morning it killed me not to put it in the grinder because I want to kind of use up what I've got in my grinder before I do it. But that's how this kind of marketing stuff works, right? I mean,
That's
they
it.
just planted that seed. So Chris, thanks for planting the seed. Now I'm only going to be able to drink that brew from Island Coffee.
Well, think about it, right? What did he do? He found somebody who was his target customer. Customer. This guy likes coffee.
Yeah.
And then you make a product that's so good that you can't help people talk, but people talk about it. Well, we talked about it because you got free coffee, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But
we won't talk about it again unless they sponsor us.
But here's
this
the cool
is not
thing,
a sponsored spot.
But the magic is his product was so good.
Yeah, it was good.
That you have since reordered. That's the key. It's one thing to get them. It's another thing to get them to listen to that second episode.
I know. And I can't stop talking about it. It's so good. People are just like, first I was like, I don't know. How different can it really be? You've gotten that kind of stuff before, right?
Yeah.
How different can it really be? Well, apparently very, very different. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it.
Well, I saw that in Facebook. I'm glad you brought that up. How do you make a podcast different?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's like, how do you differentiate from all the other podcasts in your space? And I was like, well, it is hard if you think about it. Like if it's, if you take something like a sports show, like let's say there was 3 Cleveland Browns podcasts. I don't know how many there are, but I always say that the biggest advantage if you do a TV show podcast, the TV show, the official one from the network is never going to say, man, episode 3 was, they're not going to bash their own show. So that's one thing. You can be a little more subjective than say a corporate or official show. But if it's 3 Cleveland Brown shows, I was like, well, I guess part of it is going to be the background of the host, the energy, the length,
there's not a formula for people. I think it's just be authentic, because you can't fake it for very long, right? We've said that before. You can't fake it. Eventually it'll come out and they'll find out, right? So be authentic, have fun doing it. Look, you and I, there's not a ton of incentive to show up on Saturday mornings. We get some Patreon folks,
right.
But it's so much fun. And our audience says they just like coming out on Saturday mornings because it's fun, right?
It's fun.
And so we just, and that's just us being us. And so you just find that thing. And I think you got to play to your strengths on this. Like find out what you're really good at and then just do it a lot on your podcast. Dan on based on a true story podcast.com, he gets in depth and he's really good at. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do Dan's show. I just couldn't do it. I wouldn't be interested that long. I just can't do it, but he can because he's really good at it. You're good, Dave. You're good at, like, somebody has a problem. You could sit down and make a video to help them fix that problem very, very fast. Like, you're very good at that. I've watched you make those videos in about 3 minutes and they're great. Like, and so I think you just got to find those things you're really, really good at and you enjoy. Otherwise you won't do it very long.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Key. Yeah. So, play, like you said, play on your strengths.
Yeah.
And then double down on it and realize that not everybody's going to like that. That's
right. Yeah. And you might get lucky and go viral, or it might get big, whatever, what hardcore history, that was one, like, that could have lived in oblivion forever and and had 100 listeners, but for some reason it took off, right? It broke all the rules, by the way. It was too long. It was not frequent enough. It was like, it broke all the rules. Yeah. So you just never know.
And we could play with our new toy today on Streamyard. If you go to supportthisShow.com/Streamyard, Jim is now a member of the Ask the Podcast Coach team, and he can now pull things up on the screen.
Yeah,
So
like Jason said, I always thought that said cappuccino on the phone. You know, the song that you play out there, right? Isn't that great?
cappuccino on. Yeah, okay, I can see that.
It's one of those misread lyrics that works, right? Pest
Yeah.
control and that says great background. You got kind of a cool background going on here. So now I can control the chat, which is super helpful to us, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I for me especially, it's like, okay, cool. Because it's, I mean, I have topics here we can talk about. You can watch the chat room, and so we're both kind of throwing things at each other. So
Yeah.
1 minute I bring up a topic, you're the color commentary guy. You can bring up a chat thing, talk about it, and I can. It's gonna be very, very happy because I asked StreamYard about a month ago. I said, hey, how can we do this? And their answer was just give Jim your login. And I went, no, sorry, not gonna work. So yeah, my background, I'm playing with a green screen. I looked at the box. It's never been out of the box. I bought this in 2019 as a Black Friday thing from Elgato, which is hilarious because I have Elgato lights. And I have found that green screen is a bitch. It's just not as, and I thought, I've always heard, hey, as long as you have good lights, you're good to go. And it's just not as easy. I mean, let me see if I can do this. This is what I look like, right? So I've got some shadows here, and I always hear I probably need more lights to really illuminate this. Because if you think about it, this shade of green is different than this shade of green.
Yeah,
This is
you might need a light right behind you.
yeah. So
Shining up.
that's probably what I need. And I've
Yeah.
tried doing this, but my little lights on the floor, especially when they're blue, are not
And
helpful.
is it a stretch one or is it a pull down
It
screen?
is a it's really cool. It looks like your like one of those things for those of us that remember elementary school where you used to have a screen in the ceiling and you would pull it down. This is sitting on the floor and you pull it up and it locks. And then when I'm done, I just basically kind of, I think I push it back a little bit and it's just a roll that's sitting on the floor on a spring.
Yeah.
So I pull it up, it locks,
Okay.
and when I'm done, I push it back and it rolls back into it. It's really slick. That and I forget what I paid for it because it was 2 years ago on Black Friday. And so I thought it would like, and it doesn't look horrible, but if we put me on here, like when I look, like glasses really mess it up. You'll notice my headphone is somewhat disappeared. I don't know. It's
Actually pretty good though. I've seen worse.
Yeah, and
I've seen way worse.
Hair is kind of tough. This doesn't look as bad as I thought. When I was playing with some stuff yesterday on Zoom, Zoom is great, by the way. If you go into, I think it's special something. Like I had Zoom, I have the weird part where I have a spot on my mustache that has not turned gray yet. So it's kind of a nice Adolf look. Zoom actually will let you add it also painted my lips bright pink, which was a good look for me. And I had like Groucho eyebrows. So if you want to have fun on Zoom, that was great. But I don't know if I was just getting too picky, but this doesn't look as bad as it did yesterday. But there are some things, and in the background I have with the blinds here, kind of also maybe not a great background, but
no,
yeah,
I actually think for out the gate, I think it actually looks.
not
I
bad.
think it looks pretty good. Yeah, I love the offset logo. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, the real logo that you had in the background was tough to see and get
Oh,
the
yeah.
angle, and it was super dark. I mean, this actually lightens you up a little bit. Gary Stockton says green screen's difficult. It's all about consistent lights, right? No
That's
bright
it.
spots or dark spots. That's a problem.
And if I want to go over to Pittsburgh, okay, now I'm in the Libsyn office.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and that's not bad. You can continue to kind of mess around with it. Records and Bands says a little more separation. I think, you getting farther away from your green screen a little bit would
help.
give it more lighting. Yeah, it would help on the lighting side of things.
I thought about that because the problem is it's sitting right in front of my bookcase. So
Right.
I'm kind of squeezed into my desk here. And I thought,
you could move that bookcase and push it back all the way to the wall, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing I found out with my Elgato cam, which its whole thing is, hey, wide angle. And I'm like, I actually kind of need you to kind of zoom in a bit because all of a sudden it went outside of the screen. And I was like, so yeah, it's you need 4 feet of separation Okay. Well, right now I've got about 4 inches.
4 feet
So
is hard because, of course, the farther back you get, the wider the screen needs to be.
yeah,
So, you get it. That's hard. I'm not saying he's wrong. By the way, he's
right.
probably right because that diffuses the light the best. But man, you got to have 4 feet. You got to have a pretty big green screen. I mean, my stuff back here is about that's maybe 3 or 4 feet back.
Yeah.
That would be a really wide green screen to cover that to cover that area.
Yeah. And that's where if it's something going to do all the time, which is also we're learning again why many people do audio podcasts. You don't have to deal with this stuff.
That's
Is
fun. It's fun.
I
You're looking good.
Yeah, I've seen people that you can buy just a big, huge like banner, but it's a green screen, and if it's hanging on your wall, then in theory it's going to be straight and no wrinkles and that whole 9 yards. But I thought I was just one of those things
Yeah.
where I was playing around. I was like, I've never got the green screen out of the out of the box. And then I was laughing because it was an Elgato one. I was like, well, there you go. It's now we've got the Elgato Stream Deck. We got the lights. It's like it's all Elgato all the time. So
No,
it's
it looks pretty good. I think it for you. I mean, your background was pretty dark,
yeah,
and I think this is an improvement over your real background
yeah,
as far as lighting because it almost lights you like it lights you a little bit better, which is it. Yeah, it just lights you up a little bit better. So I
yeah.
kind of like this.
The other one was more of a dungeon kind of look. So where I had
Yeah, that's
the
what you had.
lights. It was a different
Yeah,
look. I was like, all
yeah.
right, yeah. So
Yeah, I think this looks good. You have good frontal lighting going on right now. Like your
yeah,
face is lit well, and that's look good. I've been really working on my lights down here. I kind of got lazy over the last couple years, and so I've kind of worked on putting lights in different areas and getting different color lights and reflecting and diffusing the lights. I think is important, and I feel like I finally have it the way I like it. Like I'm like, okay, I like this look. By the way, there's zero adjustments on my camera. So the goal was to try and get the lighting right so I didn't have to always be adjusting my camera. The Brio that I have, the version of it, whatever, the Logitech version Brio that I have, when you start monkeying with the settings, it does some really weird things to the actual image. Some things will start getting a little, like a little fuzzy kind of stuff. And so I was trying to go zero changes, and I think I'm there. I like it.
yeah. I know the Elgato face cam. They have a zoom feature, but because it's not, I guess, the physical lens or whatever, it's a digital zoom. That you can zoom a little, but when you really start zooming in and out, it's like, yeah, that's not.
You don't, yeah, on a camera. Listen, you don't really want to be using zoom if it's
Yeah.
digital. It's never good. I mean, it's always kind of it's like that's like a copy of a copy of a copy on a copier. Remember in the old days when you do
Oh, yeah.
right, you do a copy of a
You're
copy
talking
of a
my
copy.
language, man.
Yeah, that's digital zoom in some cases. This is why all our cell phones have gone to having multiple lenses on them
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
want to get a wide angle, they want to get the right kinds of things to them. So you just don't if you can avoid using a digital zoom, please do. They're almost never very good.
Yeah. The C920 ended up at my church,
Oh,
and somebody was asking, like, hey, can you zoom in? I said, I've already zoomed in so that we're not looking at the back of people's heads. I go, but I can zoom in more. I said, but you're going to end up looking super pixelated and that whole 9 yards. And you are definitely not, by the way, pixelated right now for
oh,
your hotspot. You're actually looking,
doing
you
okay.
know, yeah, you're looking
Getting
good.
okay in there. All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's good. I was downloading. I'm a little late to my production game this weekend. Typically Friday night, I do all the video edits and move everything over to the to YouTube and Auphonic and all those other kinds of things. So I was trying to sneak that in this morning. Didn't necessarily work. Hey, Records and Bands has got a question out there.
Yeah.
So it may be a little late, or I might be a little early, but this will be my first Christmas/holiday period podcasting. Any tips for navigating it, getting episodes out, holiday specials, getting guests when guests can be hard to get.
Yeah, they can be. I think for me, a little planning up front. If you can, maybe if there's a topic that is evergreen in your niche, get that recorded. And that way, maybe have a couple in the can so that, there's going to be all sorts of, holiday activities and family stuff and that whole 9 yards to do. I know I usually bust out. I have a bunch of like Christmas jingles and music that I'll use for transitions. I always wonder, like, what about the person that finds this 3 years later in July?
Yeah, right.
Then all of a
Does that
sudden,
date it a little bit?
it's it's like, okay.
90% of your audience is going to listen to it during that period. So like but there's that 1% that's like you said 3 years ago,
Yeah.
3 years later in July.
Yeah. You can do the Evo Terra. Evo Terra does this every year.
Is that a dance? The Evo Terra?
It is. Everybody
new
do the
dance on
Evo.
TikTok?
Yeah. But Evo calls it his long winter's nap, and he takes off at the end of November and comes back in January. He just takes December off.
Yeah.
But again, there we go back to that example of how do you take time off properly. You announce it, and then you say when you're coming back, and he does. So that is one way to handle it. I know a lot of people think that, oh, maybe I shouldn't do a podcast because nobody's listening but on the other hand, I know when I'm out shopping, I put my earbuds in. I'm walking back when we had malls. I used to walk around the mall listening to podcasts. When you're going over the river and through the woods, you might be listening to a podcast. I don't know. Does your podcasting listening change at all?
That's a good question. No, because I don't, depends if I'm traveling. I don't travel around the holidays. We're almost always here.
Yeah.
For it. We get, the kids are in town, so we're almost always here. I guess it would change a little bit. I'm thinking, here in the United States, if you celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas, those are both kind of, I move my show from Thursday because Thanksgiving's on a Thursday. I move it to Friday. And over the last couple of years, I've just had my daughter on it. So it's her and I. The community loves her. So it's a chance for her and I just to podcast. So we have kind of a special show. So that's kind of one way you can do it. This year, records and bands just asked this question. I was kind of thinking, should I take 2 weeks off for Christmas? Like, that the end of the year or maybe even 3. I don't have anything scheduled in them yet, but just get through the holidays and enjoy a break. I've done 515 of these things. So maybe it's time for a break. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think some of it, as always, would depend. So if you're doing a fair amount of affiliate marketing, oh boy, that's a great point. Put that back up there. Diane says maybe a compilation of the best of. Here's the key for me with the best of episodes. If you're going to plan on doing those, pull clips out as you do them, because otherwise you're like, oh, I'll just pull some clips from the 20 hours of podcasts that I have. That means you got to listen to 20 hours of your show to make an hour. Where if you think that someday you might have a best of show, when you do something that you go, oh, that's best of worthy, pull that clip and put it in a folder so that when you go to do the best of show, it's super easy. That's something that I've thought about, and I have a best of folder somewhere, but I haven't done anything that's best yet. So I'm like, all right, well, but it's a great idea.
You have a folder, but you haven't put anything in it? Is that what
No, it's there. I think I have one. I think I started an episode where I was taking clips of other people's shows to say, this is why I think this was valuable, and this is why I thought this was good, kind of thing. But
I think if you are going to go back, Dave, if you're going to go back and do best of, it's a great opportunity. If you're not a regular listener of your own show, going back and listening, by the way, listen in 2 times, because you can get through it a lot faster. But this may be a great opportunity at the end of the year, whenever you're doing this, to kind of go, how did I do? Like, have I gotten better? Are there things that I shouldn't do again? You're far enough away from that content that it's fresh for you again. And so it just may be a great opportunity. If you're not a regular listener of your own show, maybe a great opportunity to go back and learn.
Yeah. Stefan says, maybe let people vote on the best pieces of your podcast. I've thought about that. What if you asked people, what was your favorite episode this year? Maybe as a kind of a question of the month kind of thing. and see what's resonating with people. She also says here, maybe if there's a question that you ask every guest every time, that again goes back to planning, but that would be cool to compile all those together. But I was going back, if you're doing a lot of affiliate marketing, now would not be the time to not do a podcast, because this is where everybody's shopping.
Right.
So I think we have kind of it depends on what you're doing, but as always, if it's a conflict of podcast or family, family first always hands down wins. So, but it's
I like the idea. Leo Laporte does this. He lets his audience do this for him. So they say, hey, submit your favorite spots. If you get, depending on how long your podcast is, if you get 3 to 5 of those, your best of show is built.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
and that's the other thing. Keep in mind is if you normally do a 45-minute show and you want to put out one that's 20, you're allowed to, because it's a special show. So that's the it's your show. You can do whatever you want. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice that way. I think just think through, just kind of think through it. Go ahead.
Mystic Max says, I tried to order a pop filter like you have. It was listed and this is at BSW USA. They actually make these. Why Electro Voice does not have a pop filter that fits the RE20, or in this case, the RE320, with shipping and tax, it came to $75. Yikes. That's a whole lot of tax and a whole lot of shipping for something that weighs next to nothing. Wow.
And you could go with one of those bigger pop filters, but I love the size of that pop filter. Like, small, it's compact, it's not this big. I've interviewed folks or done stuff, and they got the big pop filters and they're like leaning against their face. It's like, I don't, for a video podcast, that's not great.
Yeah. Oh, it's not bad at all. It's like, hi, Jim, thanks for coming, he said, talking behind a piece of paper. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's that's a lot of, wow, holy cow. That's always fun when you're like, hey, I'm giving away my book. Click here. You just have to pay for shipping. And you find out that shipping is $30. And you're like, wait, you're right down the street.
This is where Slick Deals is such a good service for me, where, go to slickdeals.net, do a search for what you're looking for. Then there's a button that says make an alert out of this, and you click on that, and then it'll send you have to create an account, but it'll send you, whenever those kinds of things come up, it'll just send you an email. And Dave, I can't tell you, I don't, I get a lot, like, my searches are like DeWalt and Black & Decker, right? Because that's how I buy my tools. I buy most of my tools off of Slick Deals. So I end up deleting a lot of emails, but it has saved me, batteries going on sale, or a particular tool that I've been looking for. Same thing with podcasting equipment. You might be watching for something, get that in a Slick Deal alert. And there's other services. Slick Deals may not be available in your region, but there are other services that do this as well. But it's a great way to kind of step. You do have to filter through a ton of emails, because you're going to get a lot of hits that you're like, nah, I'm not ready. I don't want to buy it. No. But it was, I needed a generator. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was thinking, okay, it's probably time to buy a power generator. If we lose power, we do that from time to time. And I set up a Select Deal alert, and I got one for half price. Like, and
nice.
Generators are not cheap. So it was a $1,500 generator that I got for $750. So that can be handy, especially this time of year, because it picks up all the Black Friday deals. Do you know, is Daniel doing his Black Friday stuff this year where you can subscribe?
I think he is, because I got a notification of it's a plugin. It's, oh man, it's driving me nuts. But there was a plugin that was on sale that has a very bizarre name. It's like Evil Goodness or Chocolatey Devil or something it's like, wait, what's I forget the name of the plugin, but yeah, he's doing his I forget his website that he has for that, but he always puts out deals and things like that. And speaking of deals, Dave has a question about, I'm wondering if this is a good deal, good website host, WordPress hosting. So I'll let Jim talk about Maple Grove Partners.
You want me to start off with that?
Yeah.
We have a sponsor over on Home Gadget Geeks, maplegrovepartners.com. $10, kind of WordPress optimized. It's a small business that does this. This is not the big, Bluehost or whatever. But we say secure, reliable, high-speed hosting, and it just kind of works. He's a super secure security nut. You don't even get a C panel. It's like, give me your stuff, we'll get it set up, and it's going to be great. And so if you want to check it out, $10 a month, plans start at $10 a month, maplegrovepartners.com. Dave, who else besides Maple Grove would you recommend?
Well, if it's for a podcast, I'm a big fan of Podpage.
By the way, that $10 for Maple Grove includes hosting, media hosting. That's web and media hosting. So he does both. He does both. No, and there's no limits.
Interesting. I personally wouldn't host on my media host, but if anybody could handle it, Christian could.
He does. It's optimized for it. He built it around me. So he was like, how would we build an infrastructure around a podcaster? And he kind of built that around me. And he's got I don't know how many. He's got a bunch of customers, and some listeners are customers too.
I don't know that I've found, because I still use GoDaddy, and I just saw somebody the other day is like, I hate GoDaddy. They nickel and dime you to death, and I was like, they work okay for me. I think it's just one of those where
they've gotten better.
Yeah,
I think they've gotten better.
And I know, it seems like especially with shared hosting, what might be happening is, you have a server somewhere and you've got a boatload of, customers on that box. And I think in some cases they overload the box, and all of a sudden you're the person that is saying whoever that host is bad. And so you move to someplace else and you'll have 15 other people who aren't on an overcrowded box. It's like, I've never had a problem. So I think it's just one of those things. But I've never used WordPress.com as a host. I know they offer free stuff, but then you're, if you want a real website from those guys, you end up paying $15 like everybody else does. So, but Jim, you're looking thirsty over there.
I am. Can you fill me back up?
We can fill you back up. And you were talking about slick deals. Well, you know who else is slick? And that, of course, would be our awesome supporters. And we are talking about, well, first of all, we always want to thank the.
This is different. Like, it kept me in the, like, I'm still here. Usually when you go to this view, I drop out.
Yeah,
I see the picture because this is the picture in
picture. Oh, so now we can point over at the dot. Yeah.
So on the Streamyard, they added this new look picture in picture. It may not be the best one though, Dave, because I'm covering up. It
will take us out. Yeah, but this would be great if you were, if I put us back, can I drag us anywhere? Can I put you? Nope.
No, but you could go if the one there you go. We could go this way. Yeah.
That'll work.
I like this one because it keeps your branding in there.
Yeah, I like that. So, but we're looking at a big giant dog with big giant ears, and that is because we're talking about the Dog Podcast Network. If you've got a dog and you need something to listen to while you are walking the dog, they've got short shows, long shows. In fact, did you know that you can listen to the Dog Podcast Network no matter what you're doing? Like, you could actually listen to the Dog Podcast Network in your car.
What?
With or without your dog.
Make sure the dog is in the car, not outside with the leash. That's not going to work.
That would be bad. But if you like all things dogs, check out dogpodcastnetwork.com. And then we always thank our $20 supporters. Awesome people like Glenn the Geek, who will be coming on the School of Podcasting again. His presentation had some stuff that I was like, it's kind of a because of my podcast story. So you'll be hearing that coming up on the School of Podcasting, maybe this week, maybe next week. We'll see. But find Glenn over at horseradionetwork.com. Shane over at tourpreneur.com. If you operate a tour business or plan on starting one, this podcast is for you. Ed Sullivan over at soniccupcake.com. So if you need an audio editor, Ed can definitely add that icing on the top of your show. Felix over at the Latin Podcast Awards. And I need to say this here, Jim. It's okay, Felix. You're fine. I'm not mad at you, because here's what happened. Felix came to me one time at an event. He says, hey, I'm going to start the School of Podcasting in Spanish. And I was like, oh, cool. Awesome. Have fun. And what I didn't understand is he was being literal. He started a show called The School of Podcasting in Spanish. And I thought he started and so I was like, wait, you actually named it the School of Podcasting? And I was like, dude, that's kind of not cool. And he's like, so he's really worried. And I was like, all right, you know what? I'm not learning Spanish anytime soon.
I have an idea for that. We can talk about it after.
All right. But fine. So Felix, you're fine. I don't hate you. We're good. LatinPodcastAwards.com. I still have it because he's like, oh, we'll just go to Luengadescalamalaga. And I was like, dude, I did, don't know. So anyway, so don't worry about it, Felix. We're good. Max Trescott over at aviationnewstalk.com. He is a 2008 National CFI of the Year. Again, aviationnewstalk.com. If you are looking again for another audio editor, check out KJST Media. That is an LGBTQ plus founded company. I found this out today, that if you are being written about in Variety magazine, so you know how often that happens, and you just put LGBTQ, they will put the parentheses SIC, which means, hey, I'm quoting them. I know that's wrong. He's missing a plus. So it's LGBTQ plus, founded company focused on helping all levels of podcasters to grow their podcasts, regardless of what you're looking for. Caden is there to help you. Check him out at kjstmedia.com. Greg over at Debt Shepherd, if you're looking to tune up your finances, he teaches financial wellness over at debtshepherd.com. If you have a true crime or a comedy or a scary story, then you need to go over to indiedropin.com. They've got a whole audience over there that just consumes that kind of stuff. And you could throw Greg a couple episodes and he would put it in front of his audience. Check him out at indiedropin.com. Kim over at Toastmasters101.net. If you're looking to develop your voice or reduce your editing time or improve your content, Toastmasters101.net. If he's in the chat room, you know him, you love him. Michael Delaney from Baby Mountain Radio Productions, where podcasting and hard work are made fun. Check him out at babymountainradio.com. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And if you don't want to do that monthly thing, check out askthepodcastcoach.com/store, where you can buy my book, do a one-time donation. The book, by the way, Profit from Your Podcast, also available now to be, if you want it signed, we can do that. So, but you had an idea for the Latin Podcast Awards.
Yeah, well, so the next time, school podcasting, next time
Spanish.
Someone comes to you, Dave, and says, hey, I want to do that. I just want to do it in Spanish. You say, well, that's okay, but I'd like to license you to do that. And it doesn't have to be a paid licensing. Like but it would, like we say, when you and I talk about, you get a co-host and that the first thing you do is talk about money, and you get the agreements laid out. Every year you check with me. Hey, you still good? Yes, Dave, you get everything. Like that's our agreement, right? But maybe smart to just draw up a document of it. That's an agreement. It's a memorandum. It's like, hey, here's what you can and can't do with it. Now, and it may come with, like, if you monetize this, I'd like a certain percentage of whatever you monetize it with. And then some agreements to, like, what you can and can't use with the name. That way it kind of flushes out all those expectations early, and there isn't gotcha. Oh, I didn't really know. You can kind of, this licensing agreement. The other thing it does is it gives you, Dave, the ability to revoke that license if it's not going the direction you want that to go, especially if they're using the brand. Right. I mean, if they're using the School of Podcasting brand and all of a sudden it goes a little sideways, having an agreement says, you know what, I can terminate this at any time. And some of those kinds of
that's the fun thing. Felix could be over there saying, I want to massage your grandmother, and I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I can say, yo soy el hombre, which is I am a man. I might be able to ask you if you like apples at this point. I'm trying to learn Spanish, just for the fun of it, because for me, being kind of coming from a teaching background, if you're not learning something, you're going backwards. And I like to keep to me, it's like exercise for your brain. They say learning a language is something because it's not easy. It's easy when you're like 7, but I've been trying to do that, and it is not as easy as it sounds. So
no, but get those expectations done. Like, get them out there, talk about it, and just, it doesn't need to be this. Sometimes this term in Disney, and unfortunately, is kind of ruined this. But sometimes that term licensed, this is a license. It gets a little. gets a little, it just protects everybody in the process. So, you know, you don't, you can get a lawyer involved if you think that's necessary, have them draw that up and sign it, whatever. You can have a memorandum or agreement between you to do it. Sometimes it's just good and healthy to kind of get that worked out. But the most important thing in this, have an end date in that thing. Don't make it forever. Like, say we're going to renew this on a annual or
it's not a bad
every
idea.
2 years or whatever. I mean, even some of the craziest, you know, even the Panama Canal was only good till 1999, right? So like you just, it's good to have some kind of ending point on that. You can always renew it. You know, you can have a automatic renewal in there that takes place, but just something to protect yourself.
Absolutely. If you're watching us on Clubhouse, you can raise your hand. Of course, if you're watching us live at askthepodcastcoach.com/live, you can just throw your question in the chat. Or if you want to jump into the video, there's a chair right behind me in the conference room here. Just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. I did find a note in Facebook from Sarah, and it just kind of reminds me of a lot of podcasters. She says, "Hello, everyone. Okay. So I'm feeling frustrated today. I feel like no one is listening to my podcast. Although I can tell from the analytics that some people are, I feel like I'm producing quality content." And we're going to come back to that statement. It's just inspirational interviews with all sorts of artists and creative people about their journeys as artists and their creative process. We're going to come back to that. I feel like there might be some people who would be interested in that, but I have no clue how to find those people. And then even when I share posts about my podcast on Facebook, no one, in all caps, sees them. Welcome to Facebook. I'm sorry, Meta. I think this is because if Facebook thinks it's something you could pay to promote, they want to make visible in their algorithm. I've tried getting a bunch of people to like and comment. I tried not posting links in the post, but in the comments, I've even tried just talking about the podcast with a picture of my cats, but they still don't show up to anyone. Again, welcome to Facebook. This is only relevant because I have a ton of creative/artistic friends who do really like my episodes when they remember to check them out. We'll come back to that, which would be easier if you could see the sports. I also post about it on Instagram and Twitter, but I don't just use these platforms in a promotional way like I post other content. I understand making big brands pay for advertising, but don't make any but I don't make any money with this podcast. It's just a labor of love. I also know a lot of my friends in bands, and a lot of my author friends have the same frustrations about no one seeing their stuff. So still, I know the goal is to reach an audience of people who are just interested in the topic but don't happen to be my friends. Does anyone have any suggestions about getting more visible in the Spotify or Apple algorithm, or find more of an audience, or any helpful words of wisdom? And Jim, that is the direct. Jim is shaking his head left to right now. And I named this. I have a card in Trello right now. You know what I named it?
What?
Ugh.
Yeah. Well, okay, but
it's a new person. That's the thing.
No, right on. Listen, I got in trouble the other week by being insensitive about these kinds of things. And it's a real question. And when you're first starting, we see this style of question all the time, right? Of like, how do I find more listeners? And you're never going to, for the most part, you're never going to Jones the iTunes or the Spotify algorithm. You're just not gonna. You got to do all the right things, right? Do the right things, make great content. But, I've been at this at work. I've been at this for 8 or 9 years now. And I just now I'm starting to get some traction in areas like LinkedIn. And I still don't listen. I have to have partners who do Instagram because I'm never going to be an Instagram influencer. It's just not going to happen. But I tell you what, I got something going on LinkedIn. Like, I've been working my LinkedIn profile for a couple of years, right? Emphasis on work and years. Like, I have been working my I mean, I'm on it all the time. I'm answering questions. I'm not just randomly following people on LinkedIn. I'm finding people that fit my niche, that where it makes sense. Some of those kinds of things. I have 11,000 connections on LinkedIn now. And it moves some things when I post stuff, right? But that didn't happen yesterday. Like, that happened over the last 5 years. So I want to say to these folks, like, it's great that you're trying to do this. Get busy. Get busy finding people, get busy talking to people, get busy following people, get busy creating great content. It will come. You just got to do more of it. Stop asking how and start doing now.
Doing it, yeah.
That preaches, right? Stop asking how, start doing now. Write that one down.
There we go. I feel like I'm producing quality content. Well, don't feel and don't think. Take somebody that's not related to you and not your best friend from high school and get some feedback so that I mean, I can only talk about my own stuff. My last 4 episodes have been based directly on feedback that I've received from people, and I've had more emails from my audience saying, that was a really good episode. And I was like, well, shocking. If you give people what they want to hear, they think it's good. It's just inspirational interviews with all sorts of artists and creative people. Please remove the word just. Keep that always 10 feet away from your podcast. I'm just a hobby podcaster. I just have 30 downloads. No, it's not a just thing. Like, that kind of demeans whatever the heck you're doing. Keep the word just away from your podcast. And then the Facebook thing, don't be shocked that it's not showing your stuff to everybody.
Facebook is a mess. Like,
Yeah.
It's a thing. We use it for our family messaging, and I actually have some groups that we use it for at work. I hate it. I got to get off of it. We're working on that, but but you got to do. And then what I have found is I have different audiences. I have this tech show and I got the work stuff, and they're in different places. So I've got to have kind of a different. I mean, on the work side, they're definitely on LinkedIn. Definitely. If I were to skip LinkedIn at this point, I would be missing tons of people.
Right.
But my tech, they don't know. I post a Home Gadget Geeks thing on LinkedIn, and they're like, what is this? And when did you start doing it? Like, why are you posting this here? Isn't your show, but on Twitter, that's, Twitter and Discord and some of those groups, that's where they know it. So,
well, I'm going to show something on the screen here. This is my Audible account, and you'll see where there's quite a few books in here. Many of them have listened about 25% of the way because they lose me. But this one at the top, you're talking about quit. What was the catchphrase again? Quit asking why.
Shoot, I should have written that down. It's gone already.
But I'm listening to Will Smith's book, and he's very much. He talks about how his manager, and this is a guy that just works it. He talks about how his dad made him and his brother build a brick wall, and it was big. And they're like, I'm 9 years old. I can't build a brick wall. And he's like, just do one brick and make it the best brick you've ever done. And his dad was very much he said, there's 2 ways this is going to work. You're either going to accomplish your mission or you're going to die. That's a little extreme, but it gave him a great work ethic. And he kind of talks about how he was a rapper, and then that kind of went halfway sideways, and then the Fresh Prince thing. And he said one day his manager looked at him and said, what are we doing here? And he goes, what do you mean? Like, I think things are good. The TV show's good. And he's like, yeah, but what's the goal? Like, what's the what do you want to do, Will? What do you want to do with your life? And Will threw out some stuff. And finally he said, all right, well, I want to be the biggest movie star in the world. And his manager said, that's a goal. And what they did was they planned, and they looked at their market, and they looked at like the top grossing movies, and what were they? And they all had aliens or some sort of special characters. There was a love story, and I forget, there was one other ingredient. So then they looked, and they just broke it down. And that's how and if you think about it, he did Independence Day. He did Men in Black. But all of them had a love story often in them. He just looked like, what do people want? Like, what do people go to the movies for? and then he did those kinds of movies.
He was basically the same character in all those movies. Though,
yeah.
right? He was just Will Smith in all
Yeah.
those movies.
And the other thing that's really interesting about Will, plagued by imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Just the whole time he's breaking box offices, and he calls himself a coward. He's like, I'm still a coward though.
He's
It's
getting
like,
fit right now. I don't know if you followed him right now, but he is getting he's on a journey to fitness, and dude, that guy has leaned down hard. He is looking good.
Well, here's the thing that he's doing, which is an interesting thing. We talk a lot of times on this show, should I have a YouTube channel?
Right.
His YouTube channel is got him showing his, boy, we talk about being vulnerable. He's showing at one point in his one episode, he quit. And this is a guy, he had two options. You either accomplish your mission or you die. Quitting was not an option. And so, but it shows him in some cases reading his book. Like the one scene was interesting. He was reading the chapter about his kids to his kids. His dad used to beat the snot out of his mom, and he and his mom had never talked about that at all, ever. But it's interesting because the episode where he quits was simply because he was trying to write a book and lose 20 pounds in 20 weeks at the same time. Mm-hmm. And because Will kind of has this Superman complex, so he said, it's weird. I have to stop the show about how I'm losing weight so I can focus on my book and then come back and lose weight. He just realized there comes a time when you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was super. I was like, and you see, he came back after the book was done and kind of picked up where he left off. So I was like, man, that's just a great example of you can't always do everything you want when you want to do it. Some things you got to kind of go, yeah, we'll do this later. I just had a conversation last night. I took a position at my church. So I now have 3 jobs. I have the School of Podcasting, I have Libsyn, and then I'm doing this kind of promotions thing for my church. And I called them. I said, I can't do this. And they said, why? I said, because I accepted the job when I wasn't traveling. I said, I traveled last weekend, and when I travel, everything goes out the window. I said, so I can't be the guy. I said, I still want to do this. I'll just do it for free. But that way you guys aren't counting on me. I said, I want to be unreliably reliable, and they said, no. I thought I had to produce stuff every month. They're like, no, we're looking like once a quarter. I'm like, okay, that I can do.
Oh, good.
But it was a case where I had to look up and go, yeah, I can't do this. It's like, not, I was going to say, can I start this in like March? And they're like, no, you're good. Don't worry about it. But again, you have to have those awkward conversations. So,
let's see. Somebody left a comment in the chat room. For a lot of folks, I feel like, so say you make a really good sandwich, right? You're just a good sandwich maker, and you got 3 or 4 of them, and you're like, I had to make a sandwich. I had to make a sandwich shop, right? And then they're like, but I don't have any capital to buy materials and equipment. I can't spend any money on having the right facility. I can't rent a place to do it. So I'm just going to try and do it out of my house, and I'm going to try and do it with what I currently have. And I'm going to sell the sandwiches from my driveway. Well, your audience is going to be pretty limited at that point. It's basically who drives by. And folks who drive by how do you get them to stop and buy a sandwich from you, right? And at that point, it's a very similar as you're thinking about starting, if you're thinking about starting a podcast and you're not willing to put any capital into the start of it, right? You're kind of just doing your podcast from your driveway, and your audience is limited and small. And you at some point, if you want this thing to grow, Dave, you got to do what entrepreneurs do. They spend money. They spend money on advertising. They spend money on marketing. They spend money on equipment. They spend money on things to give away. And I think this holds more people back. And I only say this because this holds me back. I'm cheap. And sometimes I don't want to take that chance of buying something to, Chris sent me that pound of coffee, right? Well, that pound of coffee is probably going to turn me into a lifetime customer. But Chris is like, it probably cost him $20, maybe a little bit more. Let's say 20. Yeah, we'll call it 20.
Yeah.
Cost him $20 to get me as a customer. Right. And sometimes you're like, well, yeah, I want more customers, but this is my hobby. and you kind of go, then you really don't want more customers, right? I mean, it's
that's the thing I'm struggling with is I still kind of don't understand the phrase hobby podcast. There are times like I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like on one hand, I am a hobby guitar player. I don't do it for a living. I just spent $300 yesterday on a new piece of equipment. Why? Because it's fun. But it's that weird thing where like when does a hobby podcast stop being a hobby podcast? And I was thinking about that with athletes, right? If you're a professional athlete, when you start making money with it. And I was like, is that the difference between a hobby podcaster and a pro podcaster? I was like, I don't know. But yeah, I love the person that says, I don't have any money to spend on advertising while they sip their Starbucks, playing their Xbox, and then DoorDash shows up. And I was like, come on now.
Right. Yeah, no, you got to make some of the investments. I mean, you're just going to have to you have to act like an entrepreneur, right? If you want to be, I think Randy in the chat room is saying, he's talking about starting a local. He started a hyper local. I have a very hyper niche audience in these certified strengths coaches that I do for Gallup. We have 11,000 of them, which is a pretty good number, but am I ever going to see 1 million downloads of, for an episode? Probably not, because it's a very, it's not only strengths, it's Clifton strengths. It's like, so I have to kind of know what my numbers can be. Now, those listeners that we do have, they are hyper engaged, which means when we talk, they listen, right? So it has its own thing. It has its own measurement. And it's not just about all the numbers. It's about the level of engagement that those customers have with you in what you're doing. In a hyper local or in a hyper niche podcast, those listeners are actually worth a little bit more, or maybe a lot more in some cases, because they're very engaged.
Well, that's it. I'm starting to grasp more that as much as we all like, I need more downloads. What you need are the right downloads. I would rather have 500 ex-DJs download my podcast about podcasting than 500 whoever. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a matter of attracting the right people. If the goal is to either A, have an engaged audience, or B, monetize the thing. It's not, I am not let me think of something. I'm not a golf like when you make me watch golf, I will squirm in my seat. I understand. I admire the talent and things like that, but watching golf on TV is just painful to me. It's up there with baseball. I love baseball in the stadium with you're there and it's fun, but I'm just not going to be that person. So when you have the right people listening to your show, it may be a smaller number, but I've interviewed a few people that have moved communities off of Facebook, and they've moved it to something where they paid like Circle. So they end up with, in some cases, like 90% of their community did not make the move. They have 10% of what they had, but they have much better, much deeper, and more relevant conversations. And the one person I talked to, said, go into Facebook and click on your groups and click on see more, or whatever it is. He goes, you'll be amazed at how many, same thing with Facebook. Look at how many channels you subscribe to. It's easy to subscribe to a group and stuff. He goes, but when you have to, in his case, he's actually charging for his group. And he goes, so the people that are there, the people that want to be there. And he goes, that's what I want. He goes, it's the right people. So it's kind of interesting that way. Cause I do know we love that number. Our ego loves it when it goes up. So let's see here. We've got some questions here coming in.
Let's hold these for the post show. Yeah, we got coming up here towards the end.
Holy cow. That went quick.
Working Cows podcast got a great question. I think we should cover that one on the other side of this.
Yeah. Well, speaking on the other side, what's coming up on the other side of the AverageGuy.tv, Jim?
Yeah, this week on Home Gadget Geeks, we've been kind of going through a series where we're having some of our listeners. I invited our Patreon supporters on to come and talk about, and we spent a bunch of time talking about Text Expander, because I wasn't a believer.
Oh, dude.
I know. I thought about you the whole time, Dave Jackson. So anyways, we spend a bunch of time kind of thinking about it and talking about it, and I'll post it a little bit later today out at homegadgetgeeks.com.
Yeah, well, coming up at the end of the month on the 29th, so I need your answer by the 26th. I'm talking about how much time does it take to create an episode, and people are answering that, and it's not a 4-to-1 ratio. It's many hours. So if you haven't answered that, again, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question. So what I'm doing in this episode is either A, talking with Glenn the Geek, or B, talking about things you can do to speed up your production, because there are people, and it's not a bad thing, but there are people spending 15 hours on a 20-minute podcast. So I'm going to kind of start giving some hints on that. I might also, you talked earlier about being yourself. That is somewhere coming to the School of Podcasting. I found, if you want to Google ahead of time, Willie Nelson and George Carlin are two guys that started in one direction and went back to being themselves and found a lot more success than they did in their kind of suits and above the collar haircuts and things like that. So that will be coming on the schoolofpodcasting.com. Coming right up, we are going to answer the question from the Working Cows podcast, and you can hear it if you're an awesome supporter. Go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. For the rest of you, stick around for some post show. And that's one of those things that you kind of do when you record, and you go, when I just said, and for the rest of you, stick around for some post show. I go in my head, I'm like, Dave, that didn't make any sense. Like, it's like, I'm like, if you're
listening live, I always say, if you're listening live, stay around for some post show.
So,
I've thought, why would I put that in my recording? But that is a little trick, I think, to say, hey, we do this live, and we'd love to have you. Yeah, we'd love to have you out.
Also, it's a little fear of missing out. So that question,
see, we did it. I was wondering how long it would take us to click on the same link at the same time.
So Working Cows podcast, when should a show transition from monetization based on a niche to monetized based CPM? So 5,000. This is an interesting question. Jim, what do you think? Based on a niche to monetize? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah. Well, okay. It doesn't, for my answer, it doesn't matter. If you're going to monetize, you start from the very beginning monetizing. Monetizing is not a thing. It's a mindset. In a lot of people, this goes back to the conversation we had in kind of the recorded show of it, is when you think about building your kind of, building that monetization plan, a lot of people are uncomfortable asking for money. And if it doesn't matter if you want to do it or not, if you can't separate people from their money, chances are you're never going to be able to do it. If you can't do it when you start the show, you're not going to be able to do it 2 years later when you have some listeners. It's a mindset. It's saying from the very beginning, what I'm doing today, even though it doesn't have any track record, is valuable. And it may have some potential value that hasn't happened yet. What do we call what do we call that? Well, like, we call that Bitcoin. We call that stocks. We call that, right? Lots of people spend money on things that have no value today, Beanie Babies, that have potential that may have Pokemon, that may have Cabbage Patch dolls,
right,
that may have this value in the future. From the very beginning, you need to have, if you're going to monetize this thing, you need to start setting it up in a way to be able to take advantage of that from the very beginning. Don't give things away. Don't, like, if you're going to advertise something, don't do it for free, right? That's how you monetize these things. And I don't, again, back to that question, I wasn't exactly sure about this switch.
Yeah, for me,
go ahead.
Well, I when I sell ads on my show, it is, number one, that means I'm going to advertise my stuff less, maybe. I don't know why I have that weird mindset, but I do. And I am getting paid double what the average CPM rate is for my show. I sell it per episode. CPMs work for less than 10% of podcasts.
I think they're ridiculous.
Yeah. And if somebody wants to, whoever your advertiser is, well, when you say, well, it's X amount of money per episode, then they're going to go, well, how many downloads do you get? And you go, oh, and they're going to do the math anyway, because they're from radio in some cases, and that's fine. But I don't. CPM is crap. Plus, then you got to measure it in some cases, and it's like, nope, it's this much per episode. So I'm with Jim. If you're going to monetize. And here's the thing. This has kind of been my latest little. I've been saying this a lot. Slowly, specifically, and confidently sell your stuff. Right. Don't do the whole, hey, like if you think you maybe want to kind of, I mean, you don't have to, but like I got this thing, t-shirts, kind of maybe. I mean, if you want, you don't have to. That is not it. But if you say, hey, if you would like to support the show, and you are a fan of the show, then put your support on your chest. Go over to podcastclose.com and buy a t-shirt. Clear call to action. But I hear so many, and I understand why, because we don't want to be salesy, especially if it's about our own stuff. It's like, go kind of maybe if you like, huh? Like, no,
it's a confidence problem. It's a fear, to be honest, it's a fear of rejection. Like I'm going to say, go buy this and nobody's going to buy it. And then I'm going to feel bad. Well, okay, then it wasn't the right thing to sell, or you didn't sell it right. But I can guarantee you, if you don't sell it right, it won't sell. Like if you apologize for it, or maybe, like you said, maybe if you want it, listen, CPM, I would only go to CPM if the numbers are stupid. Like if they're ridiculous.
Five-figure downloads.
Joe Rogan numbers, right?
Yeah.
You say yes to that $1 million check every time.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, right now, according to AdvertiseCast, the average is 25 CPM, which I still say is low, but that's the average. And that's for 1,000 downloads. So let's say you had 1,000 downloads. That's $25 before taxes. Yeah, and it's like, so you have to have,
unless you can take it with doing nothing, or it's not affecting your show, right? I mean, it's hey, for some people, Dave, for some people, $25 is a lot of money, right? So we don't want to minimize that, right?
Right.
But I think, be careful not to get trapped into that. I'm building my show for CPM. That's not the right thought, right?
No.
CPM's the last thing you're building your show for. You should be building it for awesome customer engagement, where you're selling spots, or if you're going to sell, you're selling spots, or you're selling merch. That's where the money. I think that's where the smart money is.
And advertising is one of the many streams of income you want. So you usually don't just have one. But I was talking with Glenn. I've talked with Jordan Harbinger, guys that do advertising a lot. And if you have somebody that's like, I'd like to advertise on your show. I'm a small local dealer, and can we set up some codes to track this? And I'm really interested on the ROI. That is not the sponsor you want. You want a sponsor who just wants their brand out there. They just want to just spew their logo everywhere. They're not looking for, and they're not going to count every download. They're not going to, both those guys are like, no, that's like the worst sponsor ever, because they're going to, check every day. They're going to be obsessing over your stats, things like that. So it's tricky.
Dave, what's our budget for this show? That's like, often I'd say zero, but that's not really true, right? Because we have, there's things this new background today, right? You've spent, may not be this year, but you spent some money on a new camera, new green screen, software associated with it, right? I mean, there's some dollars that go into this.
Yeah. If somebody said, is this a professional podcast or a hobby? I would say it's about 80% hobby. I mean, I get up, I get to talk to Jim every Saturday.
Yeah, but we get paid to do it. We do get paid to do this.
If I did the math on this, because right now I know we've been doing it 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I've been working 2 hours and 26 minutes on this podcast already, and we haven't hit stop yet.
Yeah.
And then I do not one but two versions of it and video. So by the time I get done, it's going to be 3:00, and I started at 9:30. I make less than minimum wage, and I'm not complaining, by the way.
No. We, in part of this, we do it because we like to do it, right? There's some enjoyment in it. It does other things for you in the community. It creates and opens doors for you to do things like speak at conferences. I mean, it's part of a bigger package for you. However, if you and I said, hey, let's start thinking about monetization strategies, right? I mean, real ones. I bet we could sit down and over the course of a year or two, flip this thing into more affiliate market. We could certainly do a better job affiliate marketing, right? We could have better and higher paid ad spots on here. Like, we just haven't really worked it for that for that. And I don't know if we want to. I think we would have if we wanted to.
Yeah, we were just kind of making things up.
Yeah.
And seeing what would happen.
It's been a place to try things, right?
Right.
To try things. I never thought in a million years we'd get a sponsored coffee pour or a mug. Like these are things that just kind of happen, right? We're having fun with it. We're okay with that, right?
Yeah.
If we needed to, though, and we wanted to monetize this thing, there's probably some things we would want to do differently to, I think we would want to spend some money on getting this thing advertised into other places, go on to other, listen, you and I could go on other podcasts and promote it, work our way. That's a lot of work, but work our way onto other podcast shows and then just say, have you come out and watch Ask the Podcast Coach type deal? So that is our choice. That's how we decide to do it.
Yeah. Michael's been asking a question. I want to throw this in the chat room since he is an awesome supporter. How would you record an on-the-go weekend that could or could not be a video podcast? Because on-the-go is easy. Our good friend, the PodTrack P4, is my favorite thing. But when you're doing video on the go, the first question you have to figure out is, because you could say, well, you could use StreamYard. That requires internet, and now you're kind of stuck with hotel internet, which could be phenomenal. Or, I mean, Jim's doing it today on his phone.
Hotspot. The technology is there, not in every single place.
Right.
Listen,
video could be tricky.
If you have a modern phone, if you have anything that's in the last year or two, you've kind of got most of the equipment you need to be able to do it. You might want to think about getting some lapel mics, getting a decent camera for this. Watch some of the vloggers on YouTube if you're doing it. I don't know, Michael, I'd kind of ask, we should probably start with the end in mind. What do you want this thing to be? And then kind of back into it from, okay, well, what kind of equipment would I need to take with me? What am I looking for from an outcomes production standpoint? And then you kind of back into that.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a laptop and a face camera and some lav mics, you could easily do, it's not going to be high production, right? It's going to be a single camera shoot, you sitting next to somebody probably facing each other, a la David Letterman on Netflix kind of thing. And then record it into, either a recorder or something like that. I can't, because I have a green screen blocking me reaching into my bookcase.
Can you reach back onto that table, Dave? Can you grab the book on that table back there?
But I think it's
turn the lights down. Can you turn the lights down a little bit? They're kind of bright back there.
Yeah, exactly. Sound. Wouldn't it be funny if I reached over my shoulder and grabbed something? It's like, oh, look, it's a comb.
That was on the table.
That would be the video part that can be tricky. Audio is a piece of cake. Couple mics on a P4 and you're good to go. Video, now I need a camera.
It's never been easier, though. Never been easier to get good video than it is right now. And again, you're gonna spend a little money. I
think about that
$600 camera.
Think about that, a tripod, and Rode just came out with a thing for lav mics that goes into an iPhone, so you could just do the whole thing on your phone if you got the room to record the video. That's true too.
Yeah. So there's lots of those Rode, the Rode Wireless Go mics, when those first came out, they were the boxy ones. They kind of look like a iPod Nano. No, what was the was it a Nano? No, what was the square one?
It was the
Mini.
Oh, Nano was the one that was
it's a square one. That's what they look like. They look square. I thought that was the hokiest looking thing that ever, because people would pin them on, right? And now I'm seeing them, people are buying the lapel pieces for them, so they're putting those units somewhere else. And this Wireless Go 2 is legit. Like, if I was going to spend $300 to upgrade, if I was doing that kind of audio, that would be a no-brainer upgrade right now. That Wireless Go 2 is, from what it looks like, I haven't personally used it, looks legit. So that's, that'd be a good upgrade.
I've seen some demos of that from people that aren't from Rode, and the audio was like, and the one guy even said, he goes, I'm not going to put any processing on this. Like, what you hear is what you hear. And I was like, they now make a stick. So if you want to do a Bob Barker with that, you can. It's creating its own little kind of cottage
own little ecosystem. I bet there's some things you could do with 3D printers too to make like a holder or some
Oh, yeah.
things where you could, insert the unit in there and then do whatever with it. But those, man, that's probably my next purchase. If my daughter continues to go down this path of logging, I'll probably get her that setup.
Yeah, it's when I've looked at it, it's one that's on the list of things. It's like, well, if a bunch of money fell in my lap,
They're only $300. That's not terrible.
yeah,
Right? That wireless go to get.
I'm trying to find behind the scenes. I'm scrambling to find my
Crambling. Is that
I'm cramming
and scrambling?
Yeah, scrambling all at the same time. Yeah, I'm trying to find my affiliate link for that. Randy had a question in here somewhere. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. And that's not it. It's the old message came in. Here we go. Did you guys drive the monetization of the show, or did people approach us? If I remember right,
that's a good question.
There was a company that came out pre-Patreon called Joyride.
Mm-hmm.
And I was playing with them because, me, we like to play. And then they got bought by Google, and Google shut it down. And as that was getting shut down, Patreon came out, and we're all like, oh, well, I guess we'll play with this now. And it never was, it was just like, well, let's see what happens. We'll put this out, and so that was that. And then I don't know where the mug came. Then I was like, somebody said you guys should have sponsors.
Yeah.
I think it was the chat room. And I was like, okay,
we were talking a lot about it. We were talking a lot about sponsorship. And then we thought, well, we should probably put our money where our mouth is, literally. And we were like, well, let's see if we can. I mean, I drink a lot of coffee. Let's see if we can get the coffee pour. That started. And then I was like, I bet we could, let's throw a mug out there and see if somebody will sponsor the mug. And sure enough, they did. There are other, somebody said in chat, let's see where Pat had said in chat that there's, she says your ad spots seem totally booked. You guys could grow it for sure. Maybe, Dan sponsored the mug for quite a few months. If he stopped, it would be interesting to see if somebody, like, there was a little break between man, who was the first person? Who did I have sponsor the mug the first time?
Well, Glenn was kind of,
Glenn said he wanted.
James from the Dog Podcast Network.
Yep. And I had a mug for that. Glenn, because he's a good friend. He's like, hey, I'll sponsor him. No, just send me a mug, Glenn. I'll in the in-between. Then Dan kicked in and there could be, how do you feel like, do you think from an audience perspective, and maybe since we have an audience listening, you guys can chime in. Do you think they take another ad? I mean, there's a lot of ads in there.
Well, the other thing is I feel torn when I get to the awesome supporters, because I could just bring them up and say, hey, I want to thank everybody who's supported the show at a $20 level. We're talking about Glenn at horseradionetwork.com, Shane at torpreneur.com, and just first name, website address. And I don't spend a lot of time on it. But I do notice that when I look at that and this is where you have your own little vision. When I look at how long I actually do that spot for, I was like, but on the other hand, I'm getting paid much more. Like, that's like almost like 3 advertisements in one, if you look at the length of it, kind of thing. So it's weird, but I always worry that, like, because I know my problem is I listen to the No Agenda show, and when they get to their donation segment, because they have millions of people downloading that show, it's literally 20 minutes long. And they try to make it entertaining and things like that. But I'm always worried that, because on one hand, I want more $20 supporters.
Well, here's what you could do, though, is you could set a new bar. So you could say, okay, let's just say that got really crowded, right? And we'd be like, you could set a new bar that says, hey, that spot's now $50, whatever it is. Right. And hey, $20 supporters, you're grandfathered in until you're not. Like, we'll include you in that until you stop, and then you're gone to get back in. Dave Garofalo does this on Cigar Authority. Is once you buy an ad spot, that ad spot's locked in from a price standpoint. until it's and then the next ad gets more expensive. And it just keeps like each new ad goes up, right? And then you get that, hey, you get this awesome price. He's got some old, he has some older advertisers on there that are getting a pretty good deal until they stop. They can't buy back in at that same price, right? And so that's another way to kind of keep to know how much you're worth. Just keep bumping it up a little bit each time.
Well, you remember I used to read everybody's name, and we had a bunch of $1 supporters, and I appreciate every single one of those $1 ones. But there came a time I was like, look, 20% of the show is me thanking people. And I'm like, that's not what people are tuning in for. Yeah. Craig has a great point. He says, on our podcast, we only name patron sponsors who have signed up in the last month, which is kind of what we do when they first come on. We make a big deal and play music and things like that. But it's a catch-22 because you're like, oh, I'll just give a shout out. And I'm like, okay, and it's good. I mean, I'm not complaining at all, but it's one of those things that doesn't scale well. If you think about it, people tuned in because they like your show and your content, and you go, hey, if you give me X amount of money, I'll give you a shout out. And then when people do that, there's less of your show because you're part of the stuff that was content is now spent shouting out people. And it's like, and that's where you said you have to set a thing. I know on the No Agenda show, they do a thing where I think it's $250 if you want to be mentioned at the beginning of the show. They call them associate producers. And then they have a thing where it's $50 to get mentioned in the middle. And they've even said now where something about, because people used to give them these like paragraphs to read. And they're like, no, we're not doing the messages anymore. We'll say your name, we'll take your $50, but this whole thing, like, because people are just treating it like a sponsorship. Like, hey, come see, me at the Mugshot, blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, it's a tricky situation. And then it's weird because you end up sounding like you're complaining about somebody's giving you money. And you're like, well, no, but it's just a weird model.
If you can blend your ad spots into the show, make them part of the show so they're not, doesn't seem like they're so like, okay, now it's time for an ad. I think that helps.
We did that one episode where and again, this is where I was thanking everybody. And so we would answer a question or two and be like, hey, now I want to thank my $5 supporters. Yeah. And then we'd answer a question too. Hey, you want to thank the $10 supporters. And so there's a review in Apple Podcast somewhere it says these guys stop every 2 minutes to like do an ad. And I was like, okay, note to self, don't do that. So
well, but if you could bring, if you could bring that sponsor, your answer, you've got a question, blah blah blah, and you can bring that sponsor in to support the question where it doesn't seem like
right.
So maybe we're talking, about audio, about hiring an audio
editor,
and say, we kind of did this with Maple Grove Partners in the
right.
show to say like, oh yeah, you know what, if you're interested, you can get this. So it just doesn't seem like it's an ad spot, and it's adding value while being an ad spot in that. So I think there's some great ways to be creative. This is a spot where it's a great way. I had LastPass as a sponsor on Home Gadget Geeks for a lot of years. And we kind of blended that in with a bunch of stuff. And I didn't even mention them every single show, but I had some things that were branded with that and some, that way. And I think there's some creative ways to do it without saying, okay, let's take a commercial break today, and reading some kind of copy. I don't think you have to do that.
Yeah. Stefan says, how much is it to be mentioned at the end? Of course, he's kidding.
$1 million.
Yeah, it's
$1 million.
Plus, nobody's there at the end. So, Gary says, I like how Mark Maron introduces his advertisers. He segues.
Yeah.
What's weird about Mark is he'll be talking about, we're talking about Patreon, and then all of a sudden he'll be like, icing is the blah, blah. And you're like, wait, what? He just like, he does a hard left turn and he's 7 words in. And so you're like, oh, this is an ad, and you're like, oh, okay. So, but yeah, he does. There's no, like you said, there's no fanfare of like, we'll be back right after this. Yeah. There's none of that with Mark. Yeah. He's just like, and I was thinking that we were all going to die because COVID and blah, blah, blah. And if you need stamps tomorrow, I got a great place for you. You're like, wait, what? It's like, he just flows. You're like, oh, he's talking an ad now. So it is interesting. I've seen people, Joe Salsy High from Stacking Benjamins does a great job of doing a tease. Like he does kind of like, hey, we're taking a break now, but he'll do a trivia question. He'd be like, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would cut? We'll have the answer, after this great ad from so-and-so or whatever. So they kind of tease you to stick around. So it's, again, just one of those where it's your podcast, do what you feel right and go to town.
Do it in your style. Like,
yeah,
figure out a way. Definitely ad reads. If you're an ad read person, ad reads get better the more you read them. So don't take an ad read the first time, and like practice that thing a bunch and practice it in real time. Don't just read it like, oh, okay, I got this thing. Actually read it out loud a bunch of times. Yeah.
Somebody was talking about, I was talking to Glenn, because I think Glenn was there when somebody came up and said, man, that was a really good presentation. And Glenn asked me, he's like, when you do your presentation, do you actually say it out loud? I said, oh, absolutely. I said, because you hear it in your head, and then I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to say that. I said, and then when it goes to come out of your mouth, you've designed something in your head that does not come out of your mouth easily.
Yeah.
And you stumble all over it. And I said, so, and I think it's just a Dave thing. When I present, almost from the minute somebody, like I'm speaking in March in Nashville on podcast monetization, that's already turning in my head about this. And I will work on that thing. Plus they give me 45 minutes. Oh, that's going to be fun. So I'm looking forward to that, but I will work on that over and over and over. Like the thing for the blockchain that I did, I remember Tuesday night. So I think I presented on Thursday. Tuesday night, I did that at least 4 or 5 times, and it's a 20-minute presentation. And the reason I do that, I don't want to memorize it because, oh, is that boring to watch? But once I really get confident on the next slide and this and that, then my brain goes out and finds the sprinkles and the icing. They go, ooh, what would be a good point here? That's when I get it solid, then my brain starts going, ooh, here's how we can, here's a great joke for that or whatever, and things like that. So that's just me.
You got to practice. You got to practice this thing, right? Felix in the chat room says, what about sponsored interviews? This is tricky. If the guest is on topic, are these ever natural feeling, or do listeners tune that out? Any thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I'm with you. Boy, that is a slippery. So if it's on topic, you have to disclose for the FCC. And I don't know if I hear somebody, come on and like, hey, today show is brought to you by theaverageguy.tv. I'll be interviewing Jim from theaverageguy.tv. Right there, I'm kind of like, oh, this is a sham wow commercial, possibly.
Yeah.
So there's that. And my biggest worry of paying for guests is you do it once and you're like, oh, cool. And then you get those your kid needs braces. So you decide to get them because you got an extra $300 a month coming in. And then all of a sudden now you're taking people who aren't on topic because you got a $300 braces payment. That's my biggest worry.
Okay, let's see. So Home Gadget Geeks, this would fit perfectly, right? Because there's a lot of those, gadget kind of companies in this space. What about if I had somebody on and said, hey, to do the interview, you've got to sponsor the next 6 weeks of shows. And but that show itself is not going to be a sponsored show. So they come on, talk openly. You feel like, because they're not paying for that show, so to speak, you can kind of have an open conversation about them. And then they pay for 6 ads, say $100 an ad, so $600, and you advertise for them over the next 6 weeks. What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, I think the whole thing is you have to just disclose it.
Yeah.
And if it's on topic, I know I have right now, I have Thomas from Novel Marketing is sponsoring the School of Podcasting. And I didn't do that until I did an ad. I did a survey of my newsletter people. I said, how many people are seriously thinking of writing a book in the next year and a half? And it was like 87%. And I went, okay, this fits my audience then.
Felix thinks that's a smart idea. So Felix, I appreciate that.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that gets you out of the sticky wicket of like, this show is sponsored by. I also think it sets the expectation during the show that this isn't a paid spot. This spot we're talking of is a host from that standpoint. This isn't a paid spot. Yeah, they're going to pay for some advertising. The other thing it kind of does is allows you, you've had them on the show, And then you keep reminding your listeners, hey, yeah, remember we had them on 3 weeks ago and they talked about this? Well, here it is. Boom, boom, boom. To me, that feels a little more natural than the whole show being an advertisement, right? So to speak. So I don't know. I think there's some good ways to do it.
Yeah, Craig is asking, do I record my presentations and play them back? I do in some cases. I'll throw them into the School of Podcasting Facebook group, but I probably should more than I do, because that's another one if you listen back. But it's just a weird thing I do. As I'm listening, I'm kind of, and then I try to remember to leave time if I'm trying to be funny, like leave time for people to laugh. And the other thing I've just learned, because it's me, is if this show in March, I get 45 minutes, I will, to the second, time that to be 35 minutes long. Why? Because I'm going to call an audible. I just know it's me. And somewhere in there, I'm going to add something that, even though I've just done this 47 times, I'm going to add something that wasn't previously in there. So at Podfest, I did the same exact thing. And we're talking about value for value and streaming Bitcoin and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden I just said, so think about this. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to go after your sponsors because I don't like what you just said, I said, you can look at them and go, great, because I don't have any sponsors. Mm-hmm. And I said, I guess I'm an old hippie. I want to stick it to the man. And people laughed. They thought it was great. It took, I don't know, a minute and a half to say, if that, maybe a minute. But that was not planned. That just came out, and I was kind of reading the room and seeing what people were. So I always call an audible. And then there are other podcasts. I've done the opposite too. I've cut stuff. When I did it was a Christian podcast conference, and I was going to kind of go right to the edge with some of my jokes. And after seeing the group and seeing what they were, and I was like, yeah, we're not going to remotely, we're going to stick to the script. We're not doing anything.
Well, listen, and if comedians do this all the time and they're good at it, if you write a joke, if you're saying you're up in front of people and you do a joke and it falls totally flat, don't panic. Just say, well, maybe that was a lot funnier when I wrote it. Right? They'll laugh at that. They'll see like, oh, he knows it was a bad joke, and they'll laugh at that. Or I guess that was just funny to me. That's another saying that you can use to recover from that. Well, gosh, I guess that was it, because the silence actually helps you in that case, right? Because all of a sudden there's this really odd, awkward, silent moment, and you just let it be, and you actually get people's attention at that point, because everybody's like, why is it silent?
Right.
And you go, well, I guess that was only funny to me. And if you right, you see, that's what the audience does. They laugh, and you recover from it, and then you move on. So have some of those. If you're speaking in front of people that way, or even on podcasts, have a few of those backup things, and just be self-aware. If it doesn't land, just give it a second, and then be like, well, I guess that was just funny to me.
When I was in my 20s, I worked with a guy, and he was pretty funny. And so he went to a open mic night at a comedy club, and we all went with him to cheer him on, and he was just bombing horribly, and he had a couple of giggles and stuff, and I think you won $50 if you won this open mic night. And so he threw out a joke, and it kind of didn't land. He goes, if you guys could laugh, he goes, I really need that $50 for a card payment.
Yeah.
So the fact that his card payment was $50, and he actually then turned it and started making fun of himself.
Yeah.
And it worked. Yeah. So yeah.
No, right on. Have some of those backups. When I speak, I do a lot of public MC kind of work, and people are always like, wow, that made me feel comfortable. How did you do that? And I said, well, I've done it like 10,000 times. You need practice, you need reps, you need to be comfortable, and you need to know when you're up in front of people, you're in charge. Like, you have the mic and not them. And so you've got to be confident in that and know, like, okay, if this is the case, I got to keep going. I got to have some backups. Dave, it's the same thing in podcasting, right? There's been plenty of times on this show, like if you just disappeared, I would need to be ready to just keep going. And that's happened. Like, that's true. Right. And you need to have a few things and kind of say, okay, so let's do this. And I went to the chat room and said, hey, throw some things in, let's do some stuff. You kind of stall a little bit and get some things done until you get folks back. Or you could just be like, good night now. And, right? Just
The show's going along great, and then all
good. Yeah, exactly. You're like, good night now. I'm out of here. So, oh, you switched us.
I know.
That's the unholy. That's the unholy look when I'm on the other side. All right, friends.
Yes.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, we are. So
Thanks, chat room.
Thank you, chat room. And we have, when is Thanksgiving? Not that it's going to matter.
Not next Thursday, but the Thursday
25th.
After that. Yeah.
All right.
What's that's Black Friday weekend, though.
Well, Black Friday has already started. Black Friday started back in June. It's like
I think it's still happening. I think
it's just never. Well, that's the question that we could ask as we watch this: is the term Black Friday going to lose some of its?
Oh, for sure.
Zip.
Because it already has. Target's already doing Black Friday deals and some of those kinds of things. So, all right, friends, have a great weekend.
We'll see y'all later.
See you, Dave. See you next week.
Take care.